Welcome to the N-Central Patch Management series. We have broken out patch management. It's going to now be 2 boot camps. So today we're going to talk about configuration and deployment. And let's get started. Okay, so this content may contain forward-looking statements regarding future product plans and development efforts, blah, blah, blah. What this basically means is if we talk about roadmap, or if I talk about roadmap today, you cannot take that as a promise to deliver because product plans and development efforts may change. Okay, so my name is Jason Murphy. I am the head nerd for, I'm a head nerd, but primarily for N-Central. I used to work here at Enable previously. I left for a few years to go work as the technology and security leader at a behemoth MSP here in Canada. I left and then I became the director of managed services for a small boutique MSP. All in all, I've been using N-Central for at least, I would say close to 10 years. A little of agenda. I'm not going to read the entire thing. That'd be boring. But we're going to talk about patch mechanics in N-Central primarily. We're going to talk a little bit of just patch in general. But then we're going to get into the actual configuration, the deployment using custom properties, and talking about some other stuff. Okay, so in order for you to follow along today, I recommend you have access to an N-Central server. If you don't, that's fine, still follow along. A notebook or Microsoft Word or something where you can take notes might be helpful as well. Okay, so there are resources outside of myself. Yes, boot camps are great, but there might be times where you want to either reference this particular recording, or if you want to go into patch automation, which I'll talk about a little bit today. You can see that the automation cookbook is at n-able.com/cookbook. If you want, you can also head over to our partner forums, at n-able.com. We have the MSP Institute over at success.n-able.com, and there are plenty of automation and patching courses over there. And again, you can head over to our monthly N-Central office hours. We do them every month, and they're there for you to ask questions. I used to call it speed dating for technicians. You come in, you ask a question, and I answer it as quickly as possible. Okay. Now, let's talk about patch. Why is patching so important? Updates are published for specific reasons. Those reasons are, or at least some of them are, to fix vulnerabilities, right? I think we all know that every month when you look through those Microsoft patches and looking at the CVSS scores and what have you, you'll get a sense that Microsoft is continuously plugging the holes within the Windows operating system. So it's there to fix vulnerabilities. It's there to also add in new features. Improve performance. Oftentimes, some of those security patches have an undesired effect. So month 2, you may even see an improvement, a patch that will improve performance from patch. And obviously bug fixes and issues, like something like Microsoft Outlook going into safe mode. You want to fix those problems as quickly as you can. Patching by customer or globally. Okay, so there are some best practices that I teach when I do patch management in N-Central, and they are, MSPs tend to think each customer has their own unique needs and wants, and oftentimes MSPs will ask their customers, when do you want me to patch you? What I can tell you is in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, your customer does not care. What they do care about is that you're patching their devices, that you're not interrupting their end users, that you're not causing frictions in productivity. That's what the business owner or the decision maker, as we call them, really cares about. When you're onboarding a client, review their patch needs and try to fit them into one of your current configs. We're going to talk about the current configs and how I set them up and what you may want to look for in the future. If the client wants something special, discuss the need versus the want, and often they will fit within one of your offerings. I think I started with 2, and by the time I was done after 4 years, at that really big MSP, I think I had about 4 or 4 extra, so probably 6 in total. There were certain situations where I had to opt people out of reboot schedules. and give them something very unique or what have you. So there are certain situations where you have to, like, for example, this particular customer here in Ottawa, where I am, they were airdropping supplies into war zones. So servers, for example, could not go down at a critical time. So I had to work with that organization very, very closely. Now, if they do not want, you may have to also create a special configuration just for them, but try to limit that where you can. And try to stay between 2 and 5 different patch configurations. So I started with 2, and after 4 years, I had about 6. Now, that being said, it depends on how granular you want to make your patching as well. If you're going to use custom properties, for example, to create reboot schedules, you may have 3 or 4 of those, right? So don't take this as gospel, but if you're creating all-encompassing patch rules, typically anywhere from 2 to 6 is usually a good benchmark. Now, when you're creating patching, what you do not want to do, and just so that you understand my role as a head nerd, is that I work with some of the biggest and best MSPs, and I have for the past 10 years. I've worked in outsourced IT for pretty much my entire career. I used to patch Windows NT devices by hand. Logging, the question number 1, we don't handle patching today. Oh, geez. I wish somebody did, because I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning patching Windows NT devices way back in the day by clicking, Windows Update, and then usually breaking something. So what I'm trying to suggest is keep it err on the side of simplicity where you can. Embedding patching at your customer will make things much more complex. You want to keep it global at the service organization level, at the top level. Okay. Let's talk about the reasons why we do this. Okay. As we are fixing vulnerabilities or plugging the holes within the Windows operating system, we have to be mindful of why. Okay. So when we look at defense in depth, as it's called, or layered security is another way to talk through this, is that there are threat actors and they have certain motivations, right? So when we look to this, we can look to organized crime, right? We can look to nation state. And when I worked for SolarWinds, I can tell you there are certain nation states that are trying to break into your customer computers. So that one is near and dear to myself. Cyber terrorists, okay? They are also trying to hack into computers, and they have different motivations. Like when you're looking at organized crime, typically it's something financial. When it's nation state, it could be political, I won't get into the my thoughts on that, but cyber terrorists, why do they do this? Fear. It's a matter of time. This is what they do. Insiders. Now, these are one of our weakest links. Typically, there can be somebody on the inside who is also, trying to steal information. And then also things like hacktivists. They're obviously unpredictable, difficult to defend against. You never know where they are, that kind of thing. So how do we protect ourselves and our customers in this, cybersecurity world, right? Obviously, patching is one of the most important things that you're going to need to do. I like to go back to, I'll use the Equifax breach. I used to support Equifax way back in the day. So I didn't work for them directly, but I worked in an outsourced division for Equifax. And what I can tell you is that particular breach would not have happened if one Linux server was patched. So it is very, very important, okay, to be patching your systems. Now, why patch regularly and often? Why is it critical? Okay, so 43% of attacks target in small and medium businesses. 60% could have been prevented by a patch. That is a pretty high, statistic when you think about it, right? Like if all I need to do, more than half of the devices that are getting, breached out there could be prevented by simply patching the devices, okay? you have an average of 15 days to patch your devices. So I tell people, and I still see this to this day, I have a call next week with an MSP who is patching monthly. You have to patch weekly. Now, you may have customers. I'll give you a prime example. I worked for an enterprise IT division once for this outsourced provider. So I was in their internal IT. And long story short is, back in the day, everybody patched monthly because Microsoft patches were coming out monthly. That is not the case anymore. There are out-of-band patches coming out throughout the month. You might get lucky one month. I don't remember a month that everything was just released on Patch Tuesday. Majority is, but not all. So you have to be setting up routines that are patching on a weekly basis. This is the conversation that you need to have with your customer when that customer tells you. And again, I had a stalwart IT director who told me, I will not patch my device. It's too much risk to patch my devices weekly. Too many problems with patching. I can't possibly do it in a weekly cadence. Well, and I had to try to convince him that I needed the opportunity to show him how I can do them on a weekly basis. Okay. Why do you care about patching? Well, let's be honest. If you don't patch your devices, your competitor is going to understand that you're not patching their devices and target your customer and steal them away from you. Why do I know this? Well, I used to use this as an opportunity to displace other MSPs. Here in my city, Ottawa is a very kind of a IT hotbed, and it's the capital of Canada. 2 RMM vendors started here in Ottawa, one being Level Platforms and the other one being the old Enable, now the new Enable. Okay, so that being said, where was I kind of going with this is that when I used to meet with customers, now I wasn't I was a sales executive for a little while, but I was mostly the technical side of the sale, like a sales engineer. So what I used to do is understand what their patching levels, and I can tell you a lot of people do patching very, very poorly, very poorly. So I used to be able to show them that, right? Oh, do you know that your MSP hasn't been patching your devices in like 3 months? So that is an opportunity for another MSP to come and target you. Customers often use patching as a metric to see if an MSP is meeting its engagements, okay? Customers will often run their own patch reports and see if you are doing what you claim you are, right? Now, you should be offering an SLA/SLO on patching. We're going to protect you. The data says it's going to be 15 days. We're going to make sure that you're patched up within that 14-day period or less. Why is patching so complicated? And I work very closely with our PM of patch, and I can tell you, oftentimes he's using expletives when it comes to Microsoft because they will break certain things, either on their own or break our stuff because they've changed something in the back end. It's not like Microsoft kind of advertises, hey, we've just changed an API. So we kind of learn as we go month to month. So why is patching so complicated? Microsoft and third parties often change their patching APIs, sometimes often as monthly. Some updates are disruptive. For example, some updates are as large as 4 gigs. Some Microsoft annual version updates require a full reboot. Without fail, you have to reboot the device. As it's patched, it reboots, right? Now, the good news is then Central can actually suppress that. So that is to our benefit. Microsoft often releases updates due to bugs and issues. Now, there are a variety of versions of operating systems that we have to support. And I can tell you, you're definitely supporting, or most of you are probably still supporting some Windows 7 machines that are out there. I would be surprised if you had any Windows 8 or 8.1 out there, but some people hold on to Windows 7 because it was such an awesome operating system. So Windows 7, 10, 11, and then you've got everything from Windows 12 R2 to 2022, right? Everything in between. So there's a lot of patches to distribute. Devices are not always available for patching. Laptops often come online from a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4:30 or what have you, sometimes less, right? Servers have an uptime requirements and limited maintenance windows, like that example I was giving you about that military contractor that I was patching. I couldn't take down their servers. I actually had to work with them on a monthly basis to go, hey, I want to create a window for reboots and everything else. So it was one of those things that servers also have some special needs sometimes. How does patching really work? Now, Arthur C. Clarke did say, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so click, there we go. Now let's talk about PME. All right, so what is the patch management engine? Effectively, it is an agent, okay? Now that agent is a dedicated patch management. Now, if you look to any of your RMM competitors out there, and I've done my due diligence so I can know what I'm talking about here, is they rely on their Windows agent to manage patch for them, right? So in my opinion, you've made a good decision by being an enabled partner because we have a separately releasable patch agent that allows us to develop and fix things like Microsoft API issues very, very quickly. PME is the acronym for the patch management engine, which was first introduced in N-Central 12. This engine replaces older patch management engine and, aside from using newer technology methods, presents a few distinct advantages. Okay, so one, we can patch and fix it whenever we feel like. The N-Central agent or probe is no longer required for most, not all, but for most patch management or bug fixes for that PME. Instead, these modules within N-Central are agents and probes that are simply require N-Central and any associated agents and probes to be on 22 or 12.2 or later. And trust me, none of you are running, N-Central version 11. I could probably even pull that part out at this point. I mean, we're going on probably 4 years. A custom service that captures the PME version information is available in the cookbook as well if you want. So if you want to understand things like, what versions are going on with all the different components within PME. Okay. Network requirements for patching. Now, this is something to be mindful of. If you're using a probe, there are a few things. The probe must be able to talk to Microsoft and or third-party update sites like Adobe. Not all of them are cached at the third-party vendor. There is another website that it is not listed here. It's called sis.n-able.com. That is where the majority of our third-party updates are pulled from. The agent must talk to Microsoft directly over HTTP or HTTPS. Soon HTTPS will be the requirement. The agent must talk to the probe via .NET remoting over port 15,000. That's a typical LAN-based communication. The agent and probe must be able to reach sis.n-able.com over port 443. And today it's 80, but that will be going away soon. If you are not using a probe, so just dedicated agents, the agent must be able to talk to Microsoft and third-party update sites. If you're, pushing PuTTY or a few of the others, again, those are ones we can look after. The agent must be able to reach sis.n-able.com over port 443. Okay, so those are the simple requirements for, or networking requirements for patch management. Now, how does patch management work in N-Central? Okay, now, this isn't just N-Central, this isn't like this is like Microsoft Update. This is how just patching works, okay? The first thing you need to do, and let's think about this logically, when you're on an endpoint, right, you're on your operating system and you want to click Windows Update, that effectively is a detection. Because what it is doing is that it is querying Microsoft and going, hey, do I have any available updates? And if it does a library compare of what is installed versus what is out there, so it does a delta on that and goes, oh, hey, yeah, you're missing X, Y, and Z. that is a detection. Same thing in N-central, but in N-central, what we do is we use the same methodology to run Windows Update for your endpoint to understand what is in the now so that it can communicate back to N-central that you have available updates. So if you're looking for N-central to patch your devices, detection is everything. Okay, minimum at least twice a day. Then there's 3 other steps that happen because once you click Windows Update, you then approve. Oh, I'm going to select these 3 criticals, 3 optional, a driver or what have you. Okay, you approve. Okay, same thing in N-central. You have 3 methods of approval. One is, I call the WSUS method, is the manual wizard where you choose the patch and you go through the wizard to get it installed. The other is choosing the devices and then going through that same wizard, or automatic approvals. So approvals. Then once they're approved, we're going to download, we're going to install, and then we're going to reboot. Okay. Now, these are all optional. So you don't have to download, you don't have to install. Pretty hard to get patches installed if you don't install though. But you don't have to reboot either, right? You can delay reboots or even script out reboots or schedule reboots. So there's a lot of flexibility around doing all 5 of these things. How patch detection works in N-central. Patch detection occurs in any of these occasions when patch detection is scheduled. Okay, so you've gone into N-central and you're going to look at 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. every day we're going to detect, okay? Which is, again, like querying Windows Update. On a full reboot, okay, so when you reboot the device, another detection is, the agent then goes back online and does a detection. When the agent is first installed on the device, does a detection. Usually takes about anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes for patch status v2 to populate. I'm sure you've seen that. During the asset scan, only if patch management is turned off, okay? So if you're not using patch management, we will daily look at querying the device for information. Patch status v2 updates on its own schedule like any other service, by default every 30 minutes. It pulls the latest data found by the last detection. Now, this is where a lot of MSPs go wrong, okay? Especially when they, they have, again, somebody who understands patching, but wants to set it up their way, right? They'll do a detection, once a day or sometimes even once a week, right? So in order to set yourself up for success, twice a day. Okay. How do patch approvals work? Again, patch approving declining can be done automatically, manually, or both. Automatic approvals are run when new patches are uploaded to N-central by the agent or when requested manually in the UI. How does patch caching work? Patch caching is done on the probe based on availability. Probe caching is done by configuring a patch pre-download window. It can be set to auto-download patches either automatically, so as soon as you approve them, or at a certain time. Now, most people, I'd say, choose this option. I never did. I like to schedule things out. I schedule all of my patch steps, as I call them. A patch-free download is only intended to save time on slower networks by downloading patches ahead of the install window. This is not a mandatory step. It's not necessarily true either. It's not just there to save time on slower networks. If you have a very large customer in a distributed, like a campus branch type situation, like you've got headquarters and you've got 20 other locations across the United States. Well, that is also when you may want to either turn on or either turn off patch management, or I should say caching. Patch caching is triggered at the agent level. So if the device is offline at the time that caching is triggered, at night, for example, patch caching will not work. A probe can be used at the customer level site level, or a combination of the two. Now, I typically recommend customer, but you can do both. Now, the probe setup. You may have seen this screen, you may not have. We've kind of buried the flexibility in here, but when a J&J printing here was set up, somebody turned on all of the monitoring across the customer and its sites. They enabled all of the functionality for discovery and caching. Now, if these were all on the same MPLS or within a site-to-site VPN, I would say you're probably safe. But if you have remote locations or different networks, you have to be very mindful of what that probe is talking to. For example, J&J Printing here is headquartered in Ottawa. Okay, so the distribution center is here. Now, on the east end of Ottawa, or the west side of Ottawa, here's my patch test group, maybe I want that probe to monitor everything, but I don't want the cache to hit these three locations. I want the agents to go to the internet and just pull them down because I don't want to saturate the network or what have you. So again, there is much, there's things to think about when turning on the caching on the probe. Okay, let's go through it. Okay, so I had End Central open. Hopefully it's still open. Bam, good, we're good to go. Okay, so we're gonna go down to administration. We're gonna go down to probes. And then I have my dedicated probe. Now that's not gonna be a good example because I only have one customer, okay? Everything's enabled, of course, because that probe is installed only at that customer. But if I go to, let's go to Celtic. Okay, so Boston, this is where that probe is installed, is enabled. But again, it's installed under Boston. I can turn it off for leads, right? So I can come back and I'm going to leave this on, but Celtic Cider Company is actually, in Ireland, for example. Okay, so I don't want the Boston cache sending updates across, the ocean. So you can see how some of this works, right? You may need another probe, for example. So these are important considerations when you're setting up the architecture of patch management for your customer. Okay. And again, there is caching flexibility, like monitoring data persistence. One thing I will tell you, and I've been asking to have it changed for a very, very long time, I haven't got my way yet, but I'm going to get there, is that this minimum should be 40 gigs. In most, I would say, when you have more than 2 to 3 operating systems and over 40 to 50 endpoints, 20 gigs is just too small, okay? Now, the patch management cache is located here. So if I was to pull this up, got my keyboard on top of my other keyboard here. Let me just go start, run. If I can type run, not ruin, Jesus, okay, run. We'll pull this over here and we'll actually go here. Hopefully I didn't uninstall my agent. Bear with me for one moment. There we are. Patch management. You know what it is? I don't have a probe on my machine. So if I did, there would be another folder for patch, the patch cache. One thing I was going to tell you to be, because I normally do have a probe, so I remember when I uninstalled it. But if you do have a probe, you'll have a folder here called patch management cache. And then what you're going to do, right, is that you're going to ensure that it doesn't, exceed the 20 gigabit limit. That's why you want to be mindful of giving it enough room. Now, it doesn't have to go here. You can tell it to go somewhere else. Like if I want to go here and call it C:/temp/patches, I can put them all right here. And again, if I save this, we'll actually create the folder on the device. Okay, so that's a handy little thing to do. Again, you can also UNC path. So if I want to go C : $/ patches, whatever. Okay, something like that. I can use a UNC path as well. Okay, providing that the path can be seen by the probe. Okay, so that is an important distinction right there. I'm going to click cancel because that's my example probe. And there you have it. Okay, so patch caching within a probe. Now, patch installation process. Patch installs are triggered based on one of the following. A patch installation can be configured to be installed at a specified time. So you're going to set up a schedule at 2 p.m. to be installed. Automatic and manual patch approvals can trigger an out of schedule installation, and I'll show you that as we go through. Patch now can be triggered manually by the N-Central user. Okay, so you have to be an N-Central user first of all, and you have to have the necessary permissions to be able to use patch management. But I'll show you those two options in N-Central in just a moment. Number 2, patch installation is triggered on the agent, and any missing non-cache patches will be downloaded at that time. And number 3, patch installation window can determine which type of patches to install at different times. Okay, so let's repeat that third one. The patch installation window can determine which type of patches to install at different times. Not everything has to happen all at once. You can set up multiple windows for success. All right. Reboot process. There are 2 distinct types of reboot processes in N-Central. One is a patch trigger reboot. It's a flag in the operating system that goes, hey, I just did patches, reboot me, please. I need to complete. Or the other one is basically, you're going to tell me to, reboot at 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm a server. I'm always on, so I can reboot at 3 a.m. You do not want to schedule reboots on your workstations or laptops at 3 a.m. I will tell you, 99% of the time, it will not work. You might get lucky sometimes. Somebody's configured their laptop to be always on. I do. My laptop's always on. But it's one of those things that most non-technical end users do not, right? They close that lid, it's in hibernation, it's lost its internet connection for the most part, unless you have configured the device for Wake on LAN. Reboots can configure to show a pop-up to the end user to decline the reboot. We're going to get into this. I'm going to show you all this flexibility here in a moment. A patch reboot versus a scheduled reboot. 1, a patch reboot is only if requested by the patch, effectively the operating system. A scheduled reboot, you're forcing a reboot at scheduled time. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, let's go through it. N-Central. Okay, so where do I want to start? I want to start over here at patch management. So if you want to go to SO level, configuration, patch management, now you know where this is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a configuration, patch configuration. For example, I'll do something like, workstations and LTs. You should do a copy paste there because I hate that default. And then what I'll do here is, do I want to alert my end user for pop-ups? I'll tell you, I turn it right off because this is for install. I do not want to give my end user a reason to log a ticket and complain that the workstation's slow, because I can tell you, when I turn this feature off, I significantly reduce the amount of tickets I was getting. So if you give people the reason to call you, they will. All right. So what we're going to do is not turn that on. Now you can if you want. If you want to keep your customer in the now around installs, you definitely can. And pop up, every 30 minutes, right? That kind of thing. I don't recommend it. Communicate externally for updates. Again, if you want to use a probe, you're going to put a 5-minute time, right? 5 minutes is infinite when trying to talk to technology, right? So if that can't, if the agent can't talk to a probe after 5 minutes, well, what we're going to do is we're going to pull those patches down after 5 minutes and 1 second. okay? The reason is work from home, okay? Not everybody is in the office, or some people are like myself and work hybrid. So it's one of those things where you may even want to reduce this down to 2. Even 2 minutes is a lot of freaking time in terms of communication. Usually it's instant, milliseconds, that kind of thing. So it's one of those things where 2 minutes is probably more than enough. Now, if it does time out, right? So if we hit 2 minutes and 1 second, then it's just going to pull down those patches natively from Microsoft. Okay, so it's a failover. Run install window when devices come back online. Check that if you want your end user to get patches after they grab a cup of coffee. Who gets Windows Update access? I do not recommend giving it to your end user. Limit it to either administrators or just N-central itself. Patch detection method, 99.9% of the time you're going to use the Windows Update method. We're pulling Microsoft patches from Microsoft directly. Otherwise, you're going to pull all of the, if you're going to use offline updates for secure networks, which I'll just read it out. An accessible probe is required to support this capability. Patches will be served by Enable's Patch Manager Cloud infrastructure. So basically, you're going to be getting patches directly from Enable, and it will be limited to a subset of system patches to keep your devices secure and up to date. We do most, if not, I would say everything for Microsoft. Enable Patch Management Engine, PME. Again, I would recommend going GA, but if you're one of those brave folks that want to use, if you have a test lab or something like that, okay, then go into release candidate. But for if it's production, I would say GA. Wake devices up from sleep. This is our version of Wake on LAN. Okay. Then we're going to detect. Now this is how I do it. Okay, so I'll name it 9 a.m. Again, I can't type, and 1 p.m. And I always, for detection, 60 minutes is more than enough. If you've clicked Windows Update on your machine, usually happens within 5 minutes, right? On servers, it's a little different, but for the most part, happens within the, definitely a 60-minute time period. Let's delete this, and we'll go into 09, and we'll go into 13. Done. I want to do that every single day of every single month. So let's just do that. So leave that twice a day. You can even do 4 times a day. Depends on how up to date you want N-central to be. Because this is about keeping N-central in the know, not just the endpoint, right? The endpoint also has to say, hey, agent, I need to communicate that information back to N-central. So there's some steps involved. So you can do at least minimum twice a day. Then you're going to download or cache patches. Do you want to do that now? Or I should say, as soon as you approve them? Say Patch Tuesday when Microsoft releases them? Or do you want to download at a scheduled time, right? If I'm trying to do this at 1 a.m., that won't work, but I will do something like 10, add, and maybe 14, 2. Every day of every month. Next. Now, what I didn't do here is, let's just rename it. If I want to do 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., there we go. Next. Then when do I want to install? Based on, and typically every MSP has this defined in their service level agreement or as part of their master services agreement, effectively their contract. It will say, we're not responsible for things like drivers. We're not going to do service packs on SQL. We're not going to do Bing bar. We're going to do this, okay? Those kind of things. And then when do you want to install? Do not install as soon as they're approved. You typically want to schedule these things out. So again, delete, and we'll go something like 11 and 15. And again, you can do it 3 days a week, 5 days a week. I would say at minimum, you should be trying to install on workstations and laptops, minimum 2 to 3 times a week. I used to set it up for twice. So this is basically what I used to do. Tuesdays and Thursdays for installs, okay? and then reboots. Now, let's talk about reboots. It is the most complicated thing out of everything in patch, only because there are humans behind technology, and sometimes they need to be productive. So rebooting them in the middle of the day or in the middle of the afternoon can be problematic. I know. I used to force people to reboot within a maintenance window of 4 hours. Used to kick off at 1 p.m. Between 1 and 4, you were getting a reboot. And then I had a number of customers get really, really upset at that. And then they were getting upset to their boss, who was then getting upset with me because, listen, I know we agreed on the schedule thing, but I can't be rebooting people when they're on a webinar, right? Can you imagine if my IT department, rebooted me right now? I'd be upset, we'll call it. So it's one of those things that you have to be mindful, right? So if I wanted to do a patch reboot at 4 p.m., and then I'm going to either force the user into a reboot maintenance window, like I said, maybe 4 hours. I would only use this on servers. That's force reboot without user notification during the maintenance window. That's only for servers. You can allow the user to postpone the reboot beyond the maintenance window. So again, if you set up a 4-hour maintenance window, once 4 hours and 1 second happens, well, they no longer have to postpone because they've basically gone past the window. The end user is now in at least some of the control. Or you allow the user to only explicitly accept the reboot. That's what most people choose these days. I allow my user to drive their reboots. Now, I recommend this option in most cases, unless you have contractual obligations in compliancy or security. A lot of MSPs do now. They actually write this right into their contract. We will take down your machine for 30 minutes once a week. It's in there, right? Because I have cyber legalities and cyber insurance and all these other things that we have to be mindful of, right? So if you have that, great. Then you can maybe use this. All right. Then what we're going to do is give it a custom name. So MSP123, and then we're going to call this, hey, gonna reboot your machine for increased performance. Thanks and have a nice day. Again, you can say whatever, let's say machine, but you can say whatever you like. Place devices into downtime during the reboot. Okay, for workstations, as soon as that agent goes down, it goes into that little disconnected blue state. Okay, so you can definitely do that. This is mostly for servers because it doesn't do that on servers. When the agent goes down on servers, the agent goes into a red state and goes, hey, I'm down. Server should be always running 24/7, right? So this is why you suppress that for servers. And then what you can do on servers is force it out of downtime. So if it's gone down and it should be back up after, say, 90 minutes, okay? And then if it's still down, then we're gonna get an alert, okay? So that's what this is for. You're gonna save the current system state. We're going to, when to reboot, schedule time. Typically, you do not want to prompt immediately when required, because as soon as install happens, it's then going to probably reboot. Okay, so maintenance window should last for 240, let's say. And then we're going to do this delete at something like, I think 1600. Ooh, 1600, add on the Friday, okay? You can choose as many reboots as you like. Okay, next. Now we're gonna save it, set it and forget it. We're gonna call this patch. Actually, we're gonna call this boot camp patch, okay? Get rid of that because I hate it. We're gonna enable third-party patching. Doesn't cost you anything, just enable it. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna select our patch management bootcamp filter. And then what we're going to do is apply this to Company Corp, Tray Research, and Celtic Cider. Now it's going to tell me, hey, this is what you've proposed. Do you want to finish? Well, sure, I wanted to finish. And now we've created the rule. Everything I just went through is a rule builder. Okay, so if you've gone into rules, and I've gone into Bootcamp Patch, effectively what I've just done is create a filter, create my customers, create all of my maintenance windows. You know, I can even do things like license modes and everything else, as you can see here. We're turning on patch. This is really important configuration that we're setting up on the device. And most importantly, when we go into the all device view, we can see that we've turned on patch. If we have turned on patch, if I turn this back on over here, features, you can see where we have turned on, that's a maintenance window. There we go, where we have turned on patch management within the maintenance windows. Okay. Using custom properties. Now, I just showed you how to build the rule, but look at that rule. It's fairly static, right? The filter is targeting workstations and laptops. Okay. The maintenance windows are set up for, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You know, we're detecting twice a day. We're installing twice a week. We're downloading as soon as we approve them. We're rebooting on Friday afternoons. Pretty standard stuff. But some of you have close to 5,000 devices. My guess is you have one really large customer, minimum. You might have 5 or 10, but it's one of those things that you have larger customers typically, right? Or you have a lot of customers. You have 5,000 devices in there. Now, when I ran N-central for an MSP, I had close to, I think, 18,000 devices. 12,000 of them were workstations. We had a lot of infrastructure. So I had to use custom properties to make things much more flexible. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, what flexibility do I need? Well, think of it like this. You've got a DC. Actually, let's just go through it and we'll talk through it, okay? I was gonna sit there on that one screen and kind of give away all the magic. Okay, so why do you use custom properties for patching? One, it allows you to apply patching rules in bulk, en masse. Have default values and set list options in a dropdown. Okay, we'll get through it. We're going to show you this. We're going to demo this. Easily create and modify device exceptions. Well, I've got 100 devices, but you can't just reboot these other 3 because they're critical. Okay, so those are exceptions. You want to create some test groups, right? You've got a large customer. They've got 500 devices. Are you going to reboot them all on Saturday night? Probably not. You want to maybe stage your patching or test your patches, right? If you're a large MSP, for example, you might even have an internal IT. You know, seen this with a lot of big MSPs. They have their own IT department. So you want to create some test groups, maybe within the MSP devices. Allow you to split based on things like roles or what servers are serving, right? If you have one customer, and I'm sure you may have come across this. I know I had one customer with over 14 SQL servers. There was no way I was patching them all at the same time, or at least doing something like service packs. So it was one of those things where I had to be very, very delicate with those 14 devices. Okay, but you want to create your groups. It's a way to group things and make things much more flexible. Okay, let's go through that. All right, so first things first, we're going to come back here. Boom, boom, boom. And where do we want to start? We want to come down and we want to go into custom properties. Now, my good friend Paul does the morning patch management, so I'm going to steal his thunder because he created a _patch bootcamp workstations and laptops. And what he did is he named it patch bootcamp workstations and laptops. Now, when he created the default value, you can see that it's to not set, meaning effectively null. It's not doing anything. It's not targeting anyone. So that's the default value. But now we've got things like Tuesday and Thursday, 8 p.m., Wednesday and Friday, 5 p.m. We can even add in Sunday and Monday, 3 a.m. Okay, let's just correct my grammar here, my spelling. So there's a lot of things that we can do as we turn these on. Now, of course, this is for workstations and laptops, so I'm not going to go through and select every, Microsoft operating system for, it's just, this is way too granular, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect or come down and select laptops or workstations. Now, the other part is you can create other device classes. Not typically on Windows, and Central is hard-coded for Windows, but for some other stuff you can. Now, what you can do is, I'll just quickly save this really quick. And then what we're gonna do is now come into a filter. Now, I know, let's see if I can do a Control F. There it is. You can see, and I'm just going to turn all of this off for now. Okay, so when you're using custom properties in a filter, give it a name, something that identifies it to the custom property, of course. So Patch Bootcamp, Wednesday, Friday, 5 p.m. Then we're going to drop down to not application, not OS or organization. We want to do device. We're going to drop down to device. Where are you here? Custom property, custom device property. And we're going to select _ Patch Bootcamp workstation and laptops equal to, and then we have all of those options. Okay. What I can do is then save it. Now, I'll just go back into that really, really quickly. If I go into, and you can notice that I turned off showing my dropdown. It is sometimes handy to have it in your dropdown because you may want to actually filter on your patch groups. Hold on a sec here. Okay, I was just trying to read a question from, his name's Carlos, one of my colleagues. Okay, so he was being very kind. Okay, so it's one of those things where you can see how that we've created the filter. Okay, now if I save this, I did save that with my dropdown. I can go down into here, and I can see. Let's go into my dropdown. I can see that I've got this. Well, it's not targeting anything. I've got custom property set. I've got the filter pre-created, but all of this work that we're setting up for custom properties is meant to go into one thing. This is the most important step. So hopefully one or two of you are still listening, is that you want to come into, all of this is about rules. And if you understand, and I do many boot camps, the rule engine in N-Central is why N-Central is what it is today. It is the automator. Now, rules in N-Central are just like your rules in Microsoft Outlook. They're pretty dumb. You have to set up the criteria to define the rule. So it takes the email from Marc-Andre and puts it into the junk box. I'm just joking, Mark. But it's one of those things where you come in here and you create the flexibility, add, and then I'm going to do, as you can see here, Patch Bootcamp Wednesday and Friday, 5 p.m. I can now choose that across my sites. I'll select all and I'll remove ABC and Camilla and test. I'll do it on all of these, okay? Or maybe I'll get rid of Joe too. And then I've got my target, right? I want to give it a name. So, _ Patch Bootcamp. I'll just call it Jason because I want to delete this later. And then what I'm going to do, caps lock, there we go. And then what we're going to do is maybe even now, because we have a target Wednesday and Friday, 5 p.m. Maybe that's when I'm going to set up my patch management reboot window. Okay, so you can, and this can be now reboots, you know, like you can get very granular with the task that you're trying to accomplish. So when I was saying earlier, you want to keep it at 2 to 5, when you use custom properties, you can really get granular with the patch behavior now. You don't have to kind of throw everything into a single rule, making it very static. You can make things very fluid, because say that I've got this reboot, I'm just going to create it. And I'm going to put 5 p.m. Okay. Let's go into forest, and then we're going to do this for servers or something, right? So there we go. We're going to 240. And then I want the maintenance window to last for 240 or something like 239. And then what I'm going to do is delete, and we're going to go at 17. And I think it's Saturday. What was it? I think it was Wednesday and Saturday or something. Let's just bear with me. I have a short memory. So, okay, so we'll do that one. And Wednesday, okay, so it was Wednesday and Friday, my bad. Let's go back. There we go. I'll save. Now I've got this one that is set up for reboots on Wednesdays and Fridays. Okay, it's already done. I can now save. And then if I come back in here, or you can see that if I come into my CPs, right? Now I can go this, right? Because I'm targeting my group the way I want. So if I reset, and I'll just choose, well, let me choose a couple workstations here. Actually, I'll choose a couple servers. That's where my safe stuff is. Actually, they already have patch. I usually have 2 devices that don't have patch on them. I'll just choose these, okay? Then what I can do is go to custom properties on the device and say, you're going to this, or you're going to this, or you're going to that. You know what I mean? Like, this is where you can get flexible and create schedules and flexibility just the way you need to accomplish the task in a very dynamic way. Okay. And that's effectively custom properties. Now, one thing I did glaze over really quickly, because I immediately go into dropdowns. Dropdowns are kind of the way most people use this, because again, when you're creating filters and everything else, you've created all of the information, so there's no typos. What happens is if you go into custom properties and do a text type, you can do much of the same thing, but if you misspell when, so something like this. Here, let's call it patch reboot by day of the week. And you type in Wednesday. Well, this isn't going to work because it won't filter correctly. You have to have the exact same information. So that is why I do recommend creating drop downs to kind of keep you more on the rails. Okay. Let's come back to the slides to kind of keep me on track. Patch approvals. Okay, so automatic or manual approvals, which way to go? There is no single best way to do it, but doing it fully manual or fully or not doing it at all is not recommended. So you can see what we have here. Scenario, you're going to do all patches automatic, fully auto with some declined, automatic, semi-auto, a mix of automatic and manual, semi-auto with some declined, mix of automatic and manual. The ignore is a mix of automatic and manual. And then you've got manual across the board, and the bottom, not doing it at all. Okay, so you don't want that. Can you turn on the default custom property setting by site level? you absolutely can. So that is definitely an option, right? It depends on, let me see if I can do it really quick because I know I'm already behind. But if I come into custom property, you're going to see that there are customers by text type, date type, URL dropdown, or by device. So you don't have to do what I'm suggesting because I only have basically an hour and a half with you guys, right? So I don't show you all the options, but there are customer device properties, device, and there are customer properties effectively, right? So you can do the exact same thing right here, right? It depends on where you want to create it. So if I can now come into custom properties, you can effectively create what are called org properties or customer properties. There's a couple different names for these properties, but effectively you're going to be doing the exact same thing, right? You can see the organization name. There you go. Okay, so let me just get back on track here. Automatic or manual approvals, patching best practices, how to decide which one is right for you. Do you intend to install all patches? Do you test your patches? Do you read any advisories? Do you read Lewis's blog that he puts out every month? He spends a lot of time on that blog. I'd highly recommend it. Go to n-able.com/blog and you'll see every month Lewis puts out a patch blog. Do you want to install drivers? Okay, are driver updates even important? Well, if you're dealing with something like a Microsoft Surface, they are. They're not just drivers. Even though Microsoft labels them as drivers, they're not just drivers. Okay, so let's come back. Oop, wrong Chrome. Let's go back here. There we are. So let's go into the top level. Oop, we'll come down to enable. And then we're going to go into patch management because this is where all of the patch approval love is, right? This section, okay? Now there's three different ways that I explained earlier, very early on, in terms of patching. By patch, what I call the WSys method. By device, which is choosing the device and going through the WSys method. And then the automatic approval. Now, when I was talking about which way is the single best way to do it? No, there probably isn't a best way, but I can tell you, I do, and I teach people how to create effectively what is hybrid patching. Some things cannot be left to just automatic patching. Let's be real, right? If you're going to automatically approve drivers and you have never been burned, then lucky you, because I have. So I will never approve patches for drivers in the same month as Microsoft releasing them, because I had effectively a NIC driver that got pushed to, I think it was 300 computers. Yeah, and it was basically boots on the ground, all hands, let's get these devices up. So you want to be a little risk adverse, right? So this is what I do. Just kind of go here and go there. All right, so let's go in by patch. Just as a quick walkthrough, you can show your device counts. Okay, you can see that, well, there's 7 declined. Okay, you've got some devices here ready for the install. You got some that are not approved. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to go through and select the patches that we want. I'll choose Chrome and Zoom and Odyssey. Okay, and let's do Windows 11 20H2. All right, there, perfect. Then I'm going to click next. Now, I can see that everything is now in a mixed mode. Let's go back and I'll explain why. It's because I've got some declined, I've got no approvals, I've got some for, so it's a mix mash of approvals right now. So if I come back and I go through and just choose these two because I can see that they're already been declined, then what I'm going to do is go through and I'm going to put no approval or not approved, effectively resetting it. And I want to apply to children below. Okay, so it's now not approved across the board. I can now come into my workstations group or my patch laptops and workstations and approve for install. Click next. One thing, this, when I was telling you about doing approvals, if you're doing this method and you're not choosing this, then you're going to wait for the maintenance windows to go through and just kick in for the detection, the download, the install, and the reboot. If you want those things, if you want those two patches, because it's a 0-day, you got to get it installed immediately, perform action immediately, checkbox, approve for install, click next, and then you click finish, and then those patches are happening, okay? Now, by device. I know a lot of people like to use this method. I hate it because if you want, and I'll tell you why, because you will put reporting into a mixed mode. Because effectively, if you're choosing devices, so say I've got 4 of these company corp devices. Well, I'm only going to choose 2 because I'll do the other 2 next week or something, whatever my reason is. And then, come in here, do my approval for Rally or what have you. I'll now, click OK. I'll change it, whatever I want. Well, that puts it into a mixed mode because now I've got some in no approval. I've got some in approved land. It's not my favorite method to get things installed. So if I was to choose this and this, okay, and we'll do that, something like that. Effectively, what I do is I put things into a mixed mode, okay, and it gets messy for reporting. So try to, and you're never going to avoid it entirely. There are just certain days or certain reasons why you want to target 1 or 2 devices, and okay, you can do that. Start over. And what I do recommend is using this method over this method if you can, but this is where we get into automatic patching, right? So this is where we want to click add. We want to create our workstation and laptops approvals. So, I'll generally go Microsoft, right? For the most part, if I could spell today, Microsoft. There we go. I did it. All right. And then I'll choose something like criticals, definitions, security. Not that. Let's go down. I'll choose update, updates, and upgrades, something like this. Some people do not intend to do upgrades automatically, so they'll put those over here, but they'll do these 5. This is a way to do, it's like a minimalistic approach to doing patching, very risk adverse. These are the things I have to get patched every single week, no matter what. And then you go down and you start selecting things like Microsoft. Like, are you going to do Bing Bar? Probably not. Are you going to do Microsoft Exchange? Well, if you've got it, hopefully you don't. If you've got Office, you choose Office. And again, this is based on the products that are available to those devices. So for example, if you don't have 2019, you won't see it in here. And you can come into Windows and then start selecting these, select, and then I'll come back down. The one thing about the UI of this is that once you select it once, it jumps, is what I'm getting at. It's a bit of a painful way to do these approvals, but you select them and then choose what you want, right? So maybe we're not going to do 8.1 drivers, so unselect. There. Now again, what I was suggesting earlier is that if you are going to do drivers, you can also, now I would break this out into my own rule, like Windows and laptops, approvals, Microsoft drivers, and then I would do a contains Surface. All Microsoft Surface drivers are labeled with a Microsoft Surface keyword, so you can do it through there. Okay, now we're doing all Microsoft, so I'll just get rid of this. And then what we can do is target. Again, here's my bootcamp rule, so I'll approve for install there. And then what I'm going to do, again, there's also another way. If you're creating an automatic patch or approval and you want those patches to get installed right now, you can do that this way as well. And then you create your delay. Now, say it's Patch Tuesday. Actually, what day of the month is this? I'm even forgetting. So we're at the 4th Thursday. So the 2nd Tuesday would have been the 9th. Okay, so if it's the 9th, you're going to give yourself 3 days. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, to figure out if there's any bad patches from Microsoft for that week. Okay, click save, and you're done. There's your approval. Now, it's not, I know up here, up here it says automatic patch approval rules. Well, they're not just for approvals. As you can see, you can do declines through here as well, right? And there might be third-party products that you do need to decline for particular customers. This is where I typically do my declines at the customer level. Because, hey, I've got a customer who's in a medical device and they're using a legacy application from like 2005 and it needs Java 7, blah, 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 whatever the situation might be. I will then go to the customer level, go into patch, go into my approval, create my decline. So decline Java 8. And then again, I'm at Celtic Cider Company. I'll choose my third party. I'll go into Oracle, where'd you go? And I'll do a decline on here and a decline here. There, done. I won't set up a delay or an approval or anything, but you get the gist. Once I save this, here, let's just do it here. Okay. Oops, I don't know what happened there. Okay, so I've got my decline at Celtic Cider, and then I'll go back up to the top level where I usually do all of my approvals. And you will see that I now have Celtic and Tray. Now, there is something called patch hierarchy. When you do patch approvals, you can see that you can move these around, okay? So they do come, this does work in order. So you want to put your declines at the top, and then you want to go through on the most important to the least important. Okay, so you can move these. Good, all right. Save that, we're good to go. Getting back on track. Okay, patching for macOS and Linux. Not that I'm going to spend a lot of time on this, is that there are scripts available to do Mac and Linux patching. So if you want to run any bash scripts to get a list of available updates, to push recommended updates and push all available updates, that is on the cookbook. So go to n-able.com/cookbook and you will see those particular patching for Mac. And you can run an SSH script via Automation Manager. Note that different Linux distributions may have different install commands like apt-get update, apt-get upgrade. Those are the ones I know because I've played around with enough of Ubuntu in my time. But there are different, it's not going to be the exact same thing on Red Hat Enterprise. So you need to kind of rework the ones that you want. Now, that is the end. But before you go, I do have to ask you a quick question. Hopefully you enjoyed today's boot camp. If you could please give me a rating from 5 being awesome or 1 being freaking terrible. Let me know how I did because this feedback goes back to my boss. And in fact, it goes back to his boss to make sure that we're providing enough content and training that is working for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this format. There's going to be a part 2 to this. I don't remember when it's going to be. I don't know if it's next week or the week after, but it's coming up soon. So make sure you're looking for part 2 because this one is around configuration and deployment, okay? So look to the next one. It's going to be even more in depth. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this down in terms of close. And I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for attending today's boot camp. Okay, so Eric asked probably a really great question. because boot camps can be a little more detailed than what most people, we get right into the minutia of patching or automation or PowerShell or monitoring or SNMP, but it's not for everybody. So, and Carl, give me 1 second, I'll answer your question in just a moment as well. Is there anything more on a macro level, at a high level, that talks about patching? Well, let me show you. So if you come to your browser and you type in success.n-able.com, you do have to sign in. Okay, so click the login. Let's go. Okay, and then you're going to click on the MSP Institute and then click on Access MSP Institute. Then you're going to go to Content Library, and then you're going to type in patch. Now, there's a number of things you're going to be able to find in here. Okay, so some of them are boot camps, some of them are getting started, right? So there's patching automation that I did probably a year ago. I would say, you may want to look at this one right here. It's updated. It's enable and central feature focus. It talks about the features of patch management, very high level stuff, very what we call macro, right? So hopefully that'll do it for you, Eric. So go to the very bottom and you can see that it goes through all of these things, okay? Carl says, or asks, I can't read the questions here. Here we go. What's the difference between declined and not approved? You know what, Carl? I don't know why I didn't explain that. So let's do that. 1 second here. Hopefully I didn't, no, I didn't, good. So let's go through, actually, let's go back, cancel, I'll just click into one. If I go into here, you will see in this dropdown, you've got not approved, you've got approved for install, approved for removal, decline, or no approval. Now, these are either statuses for things like reporting or actions. So obviously a decline is going to then decline the patch and not install it, right? Approved for removal is when a patch has been removed and you need to pull it off, providing that it can be pulled off. And again, if you ever want to see if a patch can be removed or not, what I will show you is this. So if you come into by patch, and we're going to look for any particular KB from Microsoft here, let's say this one right here. Superseded, no. Removable, no. Okay, so this one you're not pulling off. Okay, if I go into, what's a one that I usually can remove here? Removal, no. No. Nope. Look at that. A security update for SQL Server in 2019 RTM. Okay, so this is removable. So I could then use the removable option. Okay. Now, getting back to your question, what are the differences? So if I come in here, let's go back here. Not approved is a way to say, I'm not going to give it an action right now. This might be something I'm either going to set as something to do later. Effectively, somebody asked us to create something other than no approval, but is not declined, right? No approval is the default, what enable gives you out of the box. It's no approval. You then go in and say, this one is not approved. It's not declined, it's, not removed, it's not approved, okay? Hopefully that answers your question. So this is the default. I wish we would have just used null, right? So the existing approval is null, new approval is null, but we have now no approve and not approved. So hopefully that answers your question, Stephen. Just let me know if I hit the mark there. Or that was Carl, I'm sorry. Stephen, I have a lot of PME and Windows Update service errors. Is that common? It can be if we screwed something up, there's a bug or what have you. I would say it's not as common now as it was, I would say, a year ago. So if maybe you're running an older version of Incentral or something like that, you may have PME with bugs in it that haven't been updated or fixed. What I can tell you is that it's easily solvable. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to success.n-able.com/cookbook or cookbooks with an S. Even though it's the automation cookbook here, it's called the cookbooks here. You're going to look for PME, and you're going to look for, oh, would you look at that? There's a repair amp. Who put that there? Give me 1 second. I want to see what this is. Okay, weird. I have never seen that there before. It's actually the second one. You want this one, Patch Management Engine, PME Repair Script. This was developed by a gentleman out of the UK. His name's Ashley. Super awesome guy who came out and built all of this awesome stuff that will go through and repair the Patch Management Engine. In fact, we'll re-download it and install it for you. So check this out. And I linked directly to his GitHub as well. Where is it here? There it is. So you can look at the code and everything. It's just a PowerShell script, so you can see all the different versions. He's been maintaining this for, I would say, a year or two. So it's pretty in depth. Makes all the notes and everything. So check it all out. Okay. So run that against any of your devices that have PME problems. Zach says, is there a better place to have a Denny, sorry, Denny, my bad. Okay, is there a better place to have a deny rule at the customer level instead of the SO? Here, pardon me 1 second. I have automatic deny for Windows 11 upgrade at the SO, but a customer level rule would override if erroneously had automatic approval for upgrades, right? Correct. Customer level supersedes SO. Site supersedes. Here, let me just show it to you. Bear with me for 1 second. Here, I need to pull this over here because this is our super secret engineering documentation. There we go. Let's go this way. There we are. This is how approvals work in Incentral, Zach. Okay, let's start at the bottom. If you do a device approval of any at the device level, you get a value of 100. A site, and you can see the values as they increase. No approval is 999. Okay, so 999. That's basically effectively zero. It's reversed effectively, right? So if you do this here, this supersedes anything from the site level, right? And you can see that declined is the next lowest, and then approved for install, approved for removal, and approved not approved. Then you've got the site rule. This is the not approved. I should say no approval. Okay, so then at the customer level, same as before, decline supersedes approval for install, which supersedes approval for removal, which supersedes not approved. And then you go up to SO. So this is how, and then there's system as well. So this is how the approval hierarchy works. A better practice would be to deny at the customer level and place it up at the top above all of the other approval rules. That is correct. I take all of my declines, put them at the top because I need them to kick in before everything else. But even so, we're already going to do that for you, right? So it's based on where things are declined or approved. So you want to put them in order. Pardon me. Is this built on the latest agent version? Is the PME installed? Yes. So Stephen, when it comes to the PME, it doesn't matter the version. What we're going to do is it will do a check to see if there is a PME problem. If there is, based on his logic. And again, I recommend just reading the GitHub article and looking through. Always recommend looking at the code. But it's one of those things that it is intelligent enough to see that there is a problem and then fix it by uninstalling or installing it. I think that's what it does, or what it used to do anyways. Okay. So, you know, and again, I would recommend always, you know, because I vetted it and I've spoken to Ashley. Super intelligent, nice guy, no nefarious stuff, but you know, it's code. So you know, you want to vet it yourself, right? And look at the code, see what it's doing, how it's going to work, those kinds of things. And I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for attending today's bootcamp. If you do have any patch questions, you can even email me if you feel more comfortable, you want to write something out. You can send me an email to letterjmurphy@n-able.com. Otherwise, thank you, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.